Today's video is an exciting one because we're going to be going over one of my all-time favorite cameras, the Moviecam Super America. Here we go. So today's video is going to be interesting. I shot most of this video years ago, and I really wanted to incorporate what I shot into a video of my new series. So today's video is all going to be about Moviecam. And interestingly enough, they haven't changed their cameras very much. So what you see in this video from the Super America is really still present with the Compact and the Compact 2. Might not be so much with some of the later cameras before Arri bought them, but it's still good stuff to learn, and it'll talk about loading the magazines and everything and how to thread the camera, and so that's kind of cool. So I hope you guys enjoy this video. But before we get into it, I want to talk a little bit about where Moviecam came from because it's really cool. So in the 1960s, Fritz Gabriel Bauer, who started his own production company in Vienna called the Movie Group, and he was very dissatisfied with cameras at the time. Remember, in the 60s, there was no quiet, compact, sync sound 35mm camera. They didn't exist. So Fritz wanted to fix that. So he bought a Mitchell and he sat down with it and he tried to turn it into something that was quieter. And he put a video tap into it and did a mirror reflex viewfinder system, and he changed the mounts to something that's more acceptable, and he called it a Moviecam. And it was basically an ultra-modern camera with this old Mitchell movement. And eventually, he decided to change that whole movement idea, and he designed the BN compensating link movement system with double pearl down claws and 2 registration pins, which is what we use today in all of our modern standard cameras like the Arri cam. So it's a very standard double link system. And the cool thing about it is it created very little noise, okay? The idea is the movement inside the camera that does all the work needs to be quiet, and then you put it in a housing that's quiet and it'll make it quiet, right? That's the whole idea. So, and it worked. And he developed what we now know as the Moviecam series cameras that were sold to market. And the first real push of those cameras was the Super America. That was the first publicly released camera. And they called it the Super America because at the time, the Americans had the biggest market, which makes sense. And some guys bought into it. In fact, you could sit and talk to Denny Claremont about it for hours and hours if he was still alive. But Denny really went with Moviecam, and he was right in doing so. At the time, Arri had these big cameras that were kind of just bricks, and he went with Moviecam, and he bought a huge fleet of Moviecams, and they were very successful on big movies in the United States, including a couple James Cameron films, if I recall. So the camera was kind of successful up into the 90s, and then things started not going too well, and he ended up selling the patents and the whole concept to Arri, and then Arri developed the Arri cams out of it, and that's kind of why we have a very similar movement in the Arri cams to what he was making back then. So now I want to go over the Moviecam with you, and we're going to talk about the button placement and how to thread the camera and how to load the magazines and stuff like that. Remember, this is the first generation Moviecam that come out, so Super America, and let's take a look. This is the original Super America. It's 32 pounds with 400 feet of film with a 20 dB noise level, and it can run from 2 to 50 frames per second with a speed controller. The magazines are really easy to get into. This one is the 500-foot magazine, and it's not a displacement magazine, so it's one of the really early ones. These latches, you just push the button and twist the arm up. Push the button, twist the arm, and then flip it over, and we can look at the other side. And in here, same idea. Push the button in the center, like the Arri cameras. Pull off the core, move it to our take-up side, slap it on, and it'll lock in place. Super nice design, very elegant. New roll of film, same idea. Goes on by pushing, and then sliding the roll of film on, it locks it in place. And then we're going to go ahead and feed the film through the light trap and then back again. Now, I suggest holding on to the loop. You can see in this video I don't do that, but I suggest holding on to that film to make sure, because it's kind of hard to pull out if you don't hold on to it. And then wrap it around like 3 or 4 times, and it'll be okay if you do that. And then go ahead and close the top And the same idea with latching, you just flip it over and you go ahead and lock those latches. And now we're going to go ahead and reset the counter. So that tells you how much feed is in the film. Hit the reset button. And then we're going to go ahead and make sure we have this loop. We got to make sure we have some film coming out. Putting it on the camera, super simple. Goes from the bottom, it locks into the bottom of the camera first. And then it locks in the top last with a little slide lever that makes sure it's not going to come off. Just like that. And then we're going to go ahead and open the movement, very similar to the Arri cams. And we're also going to open up the sprocket drive, which already is open, is in this picture. And we're going to go ahead and feed the film through. If you have a longer loop to begin with, it's a smart idea. So try to get as much film out as possible to load this. Don't follow my guide here where I had a little bit of film and pulled it out. It makes it a little more difficult to do. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to make sure that we have enough loop. We're going to go ahead and lock the sprocket drive. So I'm just trying to make sure the film is aligned. There's the sprocket drive. Then we're going to go ahead and move the movement forward. Got to make sure it's lined up with a little arrow. Lock it forward. And then we're going to twist it to make sure it is engaging the perforations. Now these sprocket drives you push in and twist. And there's a little line at the top there, which is where your loop should be. So you'll see that on that picture. And then on this next one, you'll see that I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So it's a push and twist to go ahead and adjust the sprocket drive and the loop size of the camera. Now next, this is the buckle switch. And this switch is what determines if the film is over. It'll actually kind of hit that switch and turn the camera off. So that's got to be centered. And now we're going to go ahead and run the camera, make sure it's working. And you'll see if I hit the little switch at the bottom, the buckle switch at the bottom, the camera stops. There's a buckle switch at the top. That stops as well. So there's 3 buckle switches in this camera. And here's our 20 frames per second sync sound speed with no door closed. So this is how loud the camera is with the door open. It's a pretty loud camera, actually. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to show you with the door closed coming up here. The camera can only do 32 frames per second without the speed controller. So you'll see here, I'm going to make an adjustment to a higher frame rate and it's going to not like that. So it's saying right here that it can't do 34, it can only do 32, which is nice, that's telling us that. So we're going to make the adjustment to 32. That's the max it'll do without the speed control box. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to throw the speed controller box on it. This is the accessory plug for the speed controller box. And we're going to go ahead, it slides on, it hangs on the side of the camera. And it just kind of fits into place, like a snap like that. And you can see it has a frames per second 1, a time 1 to 2, and then a frame per second 2, and then a time 2 to 3, and then frame per second 3. So we're going to be doing a ramp from 24 over the course of 10 seconds to 50, and then we're going to go down again from 50, and within 5 seconds we're going to go to 24. So I hit the first button there, and then it's going to hit 50, which is at right now. Then I'm going to hit the second button, and that's going to bring us back down again. And the ramping with this, in terms of the exposure, is done through the iris control. So there's a little motor that comes with the camera that plugs into the iris control, and that's how you make that adjustment on the exposure. So the viewfinder is really easy to work on. You just go ahead and push a button on top, and it twists off. It's a bayonet mount. It's very, very similar to people who use Arri cameras. It's very, very similar to the Arri cameras. And then all you do is just lock in the extension viewfinder, and there's a little set screw in the side to make sure it doesn't move anymore. It's really, really elegant, beautiful design. And this particular viewfinder can zoom. So to get the gate out, we go ahead and we lift these levers up. And this one's a lever down. And this is a 2-piece gate. The other cameras have a 1-piece gate, but the other cameras all have 2-piece gates. Very similar to the Arri cameras. This is the dust check button. So you push this button, it'll open up the shutter. And now what we're going to do is we're going to show you how to change the shutter angle. So you go ahead and twist the movement, and then you take the shutter angle tool, shove it in the hole, and then you can make a shutter angle adjustment. It will go to 22 degrees, which is pretty amazing, actually. You'll see here it goes 90, and then it'll go down to 45 and 22.5. That's the lowest it'll actually go, is 22.5. Really cool that it does that, though. Nice feature to have. And so that's really simple. And then we're going to remove the ground glass here, and you can see there's a little hole there for our ground glass removal tool, which is the same tool for the shutter, actually. It's all the same tool. And you stick it in, and you go ahead and pull it out, and here is our 4x3 4-perf ground glass coming right out of the camera. So yeah, it's a really cool camera, and sadly, I regret selling my Super America a lot. At the time, I didn't have a job, and it was a really great deal, and I kind of bought it to resell it. And so I never thought about keeping it because it was so heavy. At the time, I didn't have a big tripod. I have this big tripod nowadays, but at the time, I didn't have a big tripod. And we're going to make a video all about the reasoning why 35mm cameras are the way they are. But needless to say, it was just too big for me. And it was shooting 4-perf, and 4-perf uses a lot of film, and I sold it, and I regret selling it. I also had a Moviecam Compact 2, and I donated that camera to the school that I worked at because, again, I wasn't using it as a 4-perf camera. So I've had 2 Moviecams in my life. I have also had a bunch of Arris. And so I like the Arris more. I think that the Arris are a little more compact, a little lighter weight. If I had my druthers right now, I'd probably buy a Moviecam SL Mark II, which is basically the same camera as the Arri Cam LT, very much the same. But it's kind of cool because it's got carbon fiber panels on it, and it's a Moviecam versus Arri. You know, it's a neat camera. But the Germans were very integrated, and that's one of the biggest problems they have, is that they're all very, very, very tightly integrated. And if you aren't in their ecosystem of integration, it's hard to modify, which is the reason why I like the Atons so much, because the Atons use a lot of off-the-shelf parts that were modified. The Arri, everything in this camera and everything attaches to it is an Arri part, you know? And so as a consequence, it's kind of hard to modify and update in today's world. And so that's one of the reasons why I kind of drifted away from these big sync sound cameras and into these kind of smaller, lightweight Aton cameras for myself. So that's my video about the Moviecam Super America and basically all Moviecams up until the SLs. And hopefully next time we will talk more about 35mm cameras with a comparison between the Atons and the big Arri cameras that have been on the market for such a long time, and what's the difference between a studio camera and an MOS camera. We'll see you then.